This is Software Project Management, SW321, SW421 at Fairfield University, and I'm talking through the slides for Chapter 12 of Wysokci's 8th edition Agile Project Management. So what do we want to learn out of this? We want to learn about Agile Project Management, Lean Agile Project Management. We want to compare the iterative and adaptive project management life cycles, and we want to think about what the toolkit is for Agile Project Management. So as previous things, it's a set of tools, templates and processes for managing projects whose goal is clearly known but whose solution ranges from partially known to totally unknown. There are two types, iterative and adaptive. Iterative is when most of the solution is known, and adaptive is when little of the solution is known. We talked about the Agile Manifesto previously in the Chapter 11 slides, so I'm not going to go through it again, but you should understand what this manifesto is saying. So when you release product under an Agile methodology, you have fully supported production versions of partial solutions, and they're released on a regular basis, whether it's quarterly or semi-annually or annually or whatever the aim is. But then you have intermediate versions released to focus groups, client focus groups, every 2 to 4 weeks, which is the iteration length, or sprint length sometimes it's called. What is Lean Agile Project Management? This is where you look at any step in the process, and if it doesn't give you business value, you get rid of it. It's as simple as that. And we talked about these 7 lean principles previously, so I'm not going to go through them again. So here's the iterative project management life cycle. And we basically do each of these iterations every 2 to 4 weeks, and it depending on the team and exactly what the project is will depend on how long each of those iterations is. But each iteration for a big given project should be the same length. So here, with the iterative model, you know most of the solution clearly. You have a strong suspicion that there are likely to be a number of scope change requests, and you might have a concern about the lack of client involvement. So when you're in the scope phase of the iterative, the implementation of immediate solutions or intermediate solutions can be problematic, and the final solution cannot be defined at the start of the project. When you're in the planning phase, the complete plan for building the known solution and a partial plan for the high priority functions. So you're not doing a traditional project management where you nail down everything in the planning phase, but you nail down a bit more than you would otherwise. So with a launch phase, you need to have a small team compared with traditional. You need to preferably have high skill level on the team. Everybody should be co-located, senior experience, and basically the team should supervise itself. So this is still on iterative. So the solution is known, but maybe not to the expected depth. We don't know all the features we're going to implement, and it uses simulated prototypes to hopefully get at the complete solution. Strengths are that client reviews current partial solution for improvements, and we can process scope changes between iterations, and it's adaptable to changing business conditions. Problems with it: it requires much more actively involved client than traditional projects do. It requires co-located teams. It's difficult to implement intermediate solutions, and the final solution cannot be defined at the start of the project, which may not be good for business. Okay, so that's the iterative version. Now the adaptive version. And here we have a very limited specification of the solution. So each cycle learns from the previous ones and directs the new cycle to hopefully come up with a more acceptable solution. The flow diagram for this looks very similar to the iterative version, but the implementation is quite different. Right, so with the scoping phase, you set the boundaries and the high-level parameters for the project. You specify the number of cycles and the length of the cycle, and you tentatively map out cycle objectives at a high level. During the planning phase, you apply the planning phase to just the upcoming cycle functionality. You don't do it for the whole product. The launch phase is pretty similar, and you'd sometimes establish sub-teams to work on in concurrent swim lanes. And I'll talk during the lecture about what a swim lane is. Right, here's the how things might work in monitoring and controlling. As you move along, the scope may increase, but you need to, at some point, hit a point where you can start reducing the size of the scope bank, if that's what the customer wants. Sometimes you just keep finding new things that you need to add to the product, and that's great. That may mean you have a very long-lived product. So the size of the scope bank just keeps growing. But you still need to release periodically, whether it's every quarter or every 6 months or every year. So the characteristics of the adaptive product management lifecycle model, it's iterative in structure. We do just-in-time planning. We don't plan the whole thing, we just do it for the next iteration. It's for, I think that should say, mission-critical projects, and it thrives on change through learning and discovery. Its strengths: we don't waste time on non-value-added work. It avoids management issues, processing scope change requests. We don't waste time planning, uncertainty, and it generally provides maximum business value for the given time and cost constraints. You really must have meaningful client involvement with this, and you have no idea what's going to be delivered at the end of the project. When do you use an adaptive PMLC? When you have a have you used this approach before? If this is the first experience for the client, you need to ensure that they'll be engaged throughout the project. Has the client appointed a qualified and respected co-project manager for this project? If they haven't, then that could be a problem. So the aim is to elicit the true needs of the client, document those needs, negotiate with the client how those needs are going to be met. Maybe you write a one-page description of the project, and you need to get senior management approval to plan the project. So for the planning the next cycle, you define all the work for the next cycle, you estimate how long it'll take, you estimate the resources, the total cost, and the sequencing. You build the initial iteration cycle schedule, you analyze and adjust the schedule, you write the risk management plan, you document the plan, and you get senior management approval. When you launch, you've got to get the project manager, the team, you've got to write the description, got to establish the operating rules, etc. When you're monitoring and controlling, you need to have some sort of performance and reporting system. You need to be able to monitor the iteration, monitor risk, report status, process scope change requests, and figure out how to discover and solve problems. So when you're closing, you need to get client approval. You need to install the deliverables. You need to write the final report, and you need to put together a post-iteration cycle audit. An Agile project management project ends when the time and budget is expended, an acceptable solution with the expected business value is planned, or the project is abandoned. And that's it for Chapter 12 of Wysokci.